Does anybody feel scared? Nobody? You feel secure in this time in the world? I feel scared. I feel like there's a lot of bad people out there that want to do harm to us. And for that reason, we have to elect the right people that take care of our security. And I'm here with a prestigious panel of people that focus on these types of questions. And as an American, I would say the first thing that keeps me up at night from a national security perspective is Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Mark Wallace, Ambassador Wallace, am I right about that?
I think you are right that Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon and the leverage that they try to get by supporting proxies, pursuing a ballistic missile program, malign influence in the region, a nuclear weapon is all about harming the United States. And now they're trying to do that with the Strait of Hormuz. And I think we're lucky. The president, I think, understands that. Nobody likes higher gas prices in the United States when they're much higher, by the way, everywhere else. I think Americans can be a little spoiled in this regard, but as a proud American, I understand that it hits people in the pocketbook. But the president's doing the right thing. But Schlapp, we should get right at it on two things. The conversation I'd want to have is why has the United Kingdom not prescribed the IRGC as a terror organization until now? And Prime Minister Starmer, on his way out, this is where I won't get applause, is at least designating them, but you can drive holes in that prescription because it's so open. Why is it taking so long? And let me throw out another provocative one. NATO. What's going on with the British military? Am I sitting in Spain right now, or am I in London? And I can say this because I worked in the House of Commons. I'm a devoted Anglophile. What is going on, and how can we fix it? And we have experts here. These guys truly know what they're talking about. I'm the unwashed American that comes in. These guys actually really know what they're talking about.
One of you, who's British? Take it away.
I'm happy to respond to that. So, at risk of sounding like this is just vociferous agreement, I think the IRGC semi-designation is only the start. There's a question that needs to be asked that's been asked more and more this year, which is why do we still have the Iranian ambassador in this country when Iran is serious? And thank you, but it cuts to the quick. It cuts to the quick of whether we are a serious country in the civilizational battle that is now upon us. I mean, Iran appears to be doing business in this country promoting anti-Semitic violence and pushing people towards anti-Semitic violence. This is not an abstract question anymore, and then I think we do need to go deeper, and we need to ask for both our countries about the role of the Muslim Brotherhood in our society, which is, we've had speakers, thank you, but we have had speakers from the UAE, not a democratic state by any stretch, but recently, for example, on my friend Jake Wallace-Simons' podcast, The Brink, warning us about their influence in our society, and they're pushing people towards Islamic radicalism and extremism.
Alan, does this matter in British politics? Questions of national security matter, or is it just all about domestic malaise?
Well, this is a big problem, isn't it? Here you have a situation here in this country today where national security matters are often seen through the prism of sectarian politics. You've seen where our government's gone on certain key issues. So, for example, refusing to allow Americans to use air bases that you've had here for decades. Why? Because the Labour politicians are scared of alienating their left wing. Attacking Israel, saying that we've done terrible things wrong with the Israel relationship, we should have been harder on them.
Can I push in a little bit?
Yes.
Do they not allow us to use our own bases because, which we put a lot of money into, because they're afraid to upset people on the left, or because they're afraid to upset Islamic voters?
Well, so in this case, it's because of the left-wing voters. On the Israel case, it's Islamic voters.
And attacking Iran doesn't...
Well, you see, Iran, of course, is a Shia country, and most of the Muslims in Britain are Sunnis. And, the fascinating thing about this, of course, is the distinction between different Muslims. And I remember, visiting members of the Shia community here who will tell me their greatest threat was from Sunni Muslims in this country. So it's a fascinating one that's not the big dividing line. The Israel thing is massive, and that's why they're voting against Labour, because they regarded Labour, unbelievably, despite the arms embargo and other issues, as being pro-Israel. Labour's been very anti-Israel, but they can't appease the unappeasable.
I don't know if this is fair to pitch to you, Carlos, but what I worry about is there's not a clear distinction ideologically left and right in this country, maybe in other countries, on these questions of national security. And there should be if the left is embracing defunding national defense and taking on, radical Islamic terrorists.
They are, and not just here, but in the United States as well. I want to just reiterate something you said, Mark. For decades, people around the world talked about how Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Leaders around the world were talking about how unacceptable it is, but nobody did anything until President Trump acted 5 months ago. And it's not just nuclear weapons, by the way. It's sponsoring terrorist organizations throughout the world, in the Middle East, in Africa, in Latin America. And so I'm glad that we have a leader in the U.S. who's actually doing what needs to be done. Yes, it's painful. Yes, gas prices are up, and they're not going to go down anytime soon, even in the context of a midterm election coming up in November. But I think somebody had to act, and I'm glad the president did it.
So you talk about the radicalism of the regime in Iran, Mark. You feel this personally. You run this group, United Against a Nuclear Iran. That means you receive death threats personally, people associated with you. Iran wants to destroy not just you and your work and others. They want to destroy America. They want to bring down civilization. When did we forget this? We seem to know this 40 years ago or so, but...
Look, I'm in the business of confronting the Iranian regime for 20 years. Alan and I go way back in this space. And I don't like talking about myself. It's one thing to threaten me. I do think it's wrong for a hostile regime to threaten an American on American soil, but I think it's really wrong for a hostile Iranian regime to threaten Britons on British soil when you have the banks of the Islamic Republic of Iran on Piccadilly Circus, and you haven't designated them as a terror organization. If you're not letting us use our bases, you're not prescribing the IRGC and doing banks with their banking, something is wrong. And I think that is not British. That is not what Great Britain is about.
Well, can I come in there? You're absolutely right, and this tells you, in a sense, in an answer to the earlier point, we have lost our way. We've totally lost our way. This country is not the country that we all remember it used to be. It's not the country we grew up in, because it's lost sight of what is important in foreign policy, what is important in national security, and that there is a moral value to things as well as a kind of let's just get business done as much as possible. And that's part of the reason why we haven't taken action. You know what the Foreign Office would constantly argue? You know what they'd say? They would say to you, there's a version of this regime that we can work with. Just understand that, a version of an extreme Islamist, millenarian regime that wants to destroy us, but there's a version of it that we can do business with. That's where we went wrong. We just lost sight of that.
Could I just come in on that?
Yeah, and is this relevant in the political conversation you're having in this country, or have they already decided the question incorrectly?
So I just want to add a more optimistic note, actually, because everything that these gentlemen have just said about Iran is clearly true, and we've been ridiculously passive. I think this points to something else. We can think about it in party terms or in broader philosophical terms. I still think that the left in this country is in medium-term secular decline. I mean, these causes are not inspiring many people. Why? Because they're rooted in a nebulous concept of international law and a kind of a soggy approach to people who are clearly our adversaries, to Alan's point. That inspires precisely nobody. So I think who is interested in this policy of appeasement towards Iran, this vacillation towards China, which is clearly taking more and more adversarial positions towards us? The liberal establishment, the liberal elite, which I know has been on people's minds throughout this conference. If you talk to the man on the street, I think you're likely to find people want much more assertive action to our adversaries.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to the two Brits. On Monday, you're going to get a new prime minister. Same party, different man. Do you envision any change in British foreign policy?
It'll get worse.
Really?
No, it'll get much worse. You have a prime minister who hasn't been in the House of Commons for 10 years, who's been dealing with local issues. Manchesterism, he says, is the answer to everything, versus national issues. He hasn't looked at foreign policy throughout his career. And he's already started. He said last week we were too easy on Israel at the start of the conflict. Not the end of the conflict, the start of the conflict. On October the 8th, he thought we should have been tougher on Israel, not on Hamas. So where do you think he's going to go? It's not going to be better.
Carlos, you asked a question. I'm going to ask you a question. Yeah. The title of this discussion is supposed to be some kind of examination of the axis of evil. We throw this term around, evil. I actually think the left doesn't believe in any evil, maybe except us. But this is a harsh term. Who are these countries that are evil?
Well, we used to talk about Iran and North Korea and Russia. I think the axis of evil right now runs through China. There's no question that what China is doing throughout the world is far more dangerous than what any of these other countries are doing. And it's also far more strategic. It's long-term. They're patient. For us, a long-term plan in the US, it's a 4-year plan. For them, it's 100 years. And so they're very strategic in what they're doing, again, in Latin America, in Africa, in East Asia as well, now slowly in Europe. And so this old axis of evil, I think, needs to be reformulated because it definitely, in my opinion, runs through China.
Ambassador Wallace, you'd have a different lineup of who's evil?
No, I think we're returning to a period of empire. But I think that the empires of evil are out there. I would include Russia in that, the threat to Europe. I would include China, absolutely, with what Carlos said. Certainly Iran and North Korea. But I think that the empires of the West, the NATOs, the United States, the alliances, are being shaken. I think our adversaries have understood the fissures of democracy much better than our friends. And they've exploited those fissures. Look, I don't want to be an American who is an Anglophile, who sits on a stage in Great Britain, that worked in the House of Commons under Prime Minister John Major in 1988 or 89, so long ago, to come in and merely bash British foreign policy, because America's foreign policy has been weak as well. We have changed and are closing the gap. But I think the wake-up call is IRGC prescription. Is the Iran example, even though I'm trading my own book, as they say, because I'm an Iran person. But the wake-up call is Iran, when we had difficulties between the United States and the United Kingdom on our base usage, the failure to prescribe the IRGC, the fact that you can go to an Iranian bank on Piccadilly Circus if you want to, the fact that you could buy a ticket from Iran Air. Something is amiss. I don't want to be in Spain right now. I'm glad I'm in Britain, but Britain, I think, needs to begin to close the gap with some of the policy.
Wait a minute, I learned things in these conversations. There are people that get on an airline called Iran Air.
There is an Iran Air
people
office.
do it?
Yeah. There's an Iran Air, and it says sanction designated in the United States. But one of the problems that we've had, it's one thing if you don't want to engage militarily, but why not engage with us on the economic side? Why should you be supporting a regime that is killing us?
So if
that is threatening Britons. You had to move out a television station in the United Kingdom because your internal security services said they could not protect their security. We had to move it to the United States of America because of Iranian assassins on British soil. Something is wrong with the West, the United States, when we can't protect our own people on our shores.
So if you two agree that this is roughly the list of the evil people, how come we're only bombing one of them? Like, why did we choose?
You can only bomb one country at a time.
Do you need a moment to think about that question?
A new war, maybe.
There's a whole green room conversation after this, and we can maybe save some things up for that. But I want to respond to both of these questions that you asked. You asked briefly, who does the left see as evil? The left despicably sees Israel as evil. And that is the state of the modern cultural left. What's going on there? And this isn't just the left, let's be honest, but what's going on there? There was something always bubbling away on the left that when Hugh Gaitskell was running the Labour Party seemed far gone when Labour was pro-NATO and so on, and this isn't just Labour. Karl Marx was deeply anti-Semitic. He wrote hateful things about the Jews, and there's always been that strain. Now, to Alan's point earlier, they have an Islamist-leaning voter base that they're doing these disgusting performances to, and that's the red-green coalition that's arriving. I think it's very important that we say this over and over again. The root of the concept of the independent nation state is Judaic. It appears in the Torah, it appears in the Old Testament. If you believe in the things that we share in common, this is where these ideas begin, and I think we need to very explicitly reroute our civilization and celebrate our Jewish, our Judaic roots. Thank you, because there is not simply, it's not simply the left, it's not simply the left. There is a growing ethno-nationalism on the right that I think is doing similar performances, and it disgusts me.
You're more willing in Europe and the United Kingdom to sanction Israel than
Exactly.
Iran.
And this is why
What
Alan is
wrong?
absolutely right. Alan is absolutely right. For our incoming Prime Minister, this isn't about political parties, but for our incoming Prime Minister, effectively the first foreign policy speech he makes is that he wants to be tougher on the cradle of Western civilization. There is a problem, and yet it's replicated in Spain.
So is this just a hatred of the concept of the people of the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament? They hate Christians, they hate their own Christianity, they hate Jews? Or is this an electoral play because your country's let in millions of people who are Muslim and they want their votes? Which is it?
Well, I mean, it's people looking for votes based on Israel hatred. It's the outcome of a kind of a radical secularization that makes us forget our roots. It's the general malaise, and I think it all needs fighting. But I just want to mention something else. I think people in the West, whether it's on the right or what have you, we don't realize necessarily the civilizational battle that we're in. Prosperity, this period of human prosperity is freakishly unusual. Most of the time, the human race is just poor. Most countries are just poor most of the time. And this prosperous age is deeply at risk, and it rests on some very unusual things, like free competition, like government that isn't authoritarian. So, absolutely, China, Iran, but also I do think we need to be mindful of Russia. Russia is a threat to sovereign European democracies, most of all Ukraine. So I think if our criteria are sovereign democracy, being allowed to live in peace without the threat of terrorism or the sponsors of terrorism, democracy, I think for me it's Russia, China, and Iran are the things on my mind.
We'll be at war with them in one shape, manner, or form.
We are at war with them already.
Hot wars, cold wars?
Well, cold wars for now, and we'll see what happens depending on their desires. The Chinese are the ones
So
who...
you buy this idea that what was told to President Trump, some say by Prime Minister Netanyahu. By the way, I think it's foolish to think that Donald Trump got tricked into a war. I find that hard to believe.
It's actually anti-Semitic.
He's his own man who has his own ideas. But how do you figure out when you use the military? And I think one of the things that concerns Americans is they don't want a nuclearized regime in Iran, but do they want ground troops on the ground in Iran? That obviously is a big step.
Well, that's a question for the military planners, because you engage in wars...
Well, it's a question for the president.
Well, it is, but he's got to take military advice on the basis of what his actual goal is. If your goal is to remove a nuclear weapon, making sure it doesn't happen, and the fundamental problem there is the regime itself, as opposed to, sort of a group in the regime who's doing this, and it is a regime itself, then you have to think, well, how do I remove the regime? And I think they've tried to remove the regime without ground troops, and it hasn't occurred so far. So then you've got a question, well, do we continue doing this? Do we do a mow the lawn strategy, where we continuously every 6 months go in for more bombing and do that and have that sort of situation, or do we do something else? That's a question for military planners. But I just want to quickly just throw one other thing in about what you said about evil earlier. I think it's quite interesting and easy to identify the evil ones in the world today, the axis of evil. It's the people who try and extinguish the human spirit. So if you think about North Korea, China, Iran and Russia, in varying degrees, that's what they aspire to do to their own people or to other people. And that, of course, is also the difference between the right and the left. The left want to extinguish the human spirit, not quite in that way, but they do. They want to stop debate. They want to make, call you racist, etc., rather than engage in the battle of ideas. And the right wants freedom and the human spirit to flourish. And I think that's how we identify who our friends are and who our enemies are.
Well, the only problem with that is that makes me think that all this evil is inside our own countries. And so you have these foreign adversaries, which do keep us up at night. We can have this conversation about who's worse and when do you deploy the military. But let's face it, we're all completely infiltrated. And we're having these battles in our own families, in our own institutions, on our own streets.
We are. And in the case of the US, which is the one I know the best, I think the right in part is to blame because we've ceded spaces. The left, in a very strategic way, has taken over the entertainment sector, academia, all these areas where the right just, gave up.
Keep going. You said academia.
Academia, without a
media.
doubt.
Keep going. It's a longer list, right?
There's absolutely.
I mean, come on. Is it corporate boardrooms?
Yeah, absolutely.
What else? Is there more?
NGOs.
All public schools?
NGOs, yes.
Yeah. Most churches?
Yes, yes.
Is there anything that's been saved from it?
No, but who is to blame? I think in part conservatives who haven't spoken up the way we should. And,
Or
that's
we
changing.
spoke up and lost our jobs and
That's right.
lost our standing, lost
That's
our
right.
money, lost our reputation. How much can you expect someone with not a lot of power to do?
But I think that's changing. I mean, look at the way Governor DeSantis, for example, in Florida handled this, right? Head on, the way President Trump is doing it. So I think now we're realizing that we need to take back all these spaces one by one, because otherwise these cultural wars, which seem very hypothetical, are actually incredibly real. And I think I do see a resurgence of conservatives realizing that they need to occupy these spaces that for far too long they just ignored.
So let me ask a question. You guys can jump in, but it would seem to me if you have an outside adversary, Iran, North Korea, someone said Russia, you said Russia, China for sure, George Soros for sure, right? These foundations and NGOs for sure. They're terrible. They're funding all the wrong stuff. They're actually spending most of their time and their money just making us all hate each other in America, make us hate America, rip down our statues, hate what we stand for. It's been a brilliant strategy. Wasn't it Khrushchev who said, I don't have to defeat you military because you're going to cave from the inside?
Matt, I think you're asking a question that is fundamental to who we are. They are turning the greatness of our democracy. We have fissures within our democracy because we're open, we're willing to engage and hear things. But they're exploiting those fissures. And those countries that we've collectively identified as the axis of evil have been engaging in forever wars, largely against America and the West. And I am tired of the narrative that somehow America is engaging in a forever war. You and I have talked about this a lot. I think the President Trump rightly took action against Iran to end the forever war that Iran has been waging on us. They've been killing Americans, taking us hostage, pursuing a nuclear weapon for 47 years. And the president said, before it's too late, we are going to end this forever war. And what is the narrative now? Forever war is being used by our adversaries to try to create division amongst us when we are trying to live in a world that is peace-loving.
And the problem is they're using new tools for it as well. Look at the infiltration of social media by our enemies here. So you talk about disunity. It's fascinating to see that the axis of evil countries have been engaged with a lot of disinformation and sort of actions in that way. You've seen what President Trump's just said about China and the 2020 election. We know how Russia tries to infiltrate social media and influence things. And then in the Iran case, fascinating example, you must have heard about this. When the bombing started last summer, everyone suddenly discovered that all these accounts promoting Scottish independence all went dead. All went dead overnight because they were being run from Iran.
I think these are examples of luxury beliefs. Scottish nationalism is a luxury belief, right? That's, before the 1970s, they were regarded as complete freaks, like sort of druids who gathered at
Are they like
Stonehenge.
California?
Are they like California?
Yeah. Is that what it's akin to?
I've not heard Scotland compared to California before, but yeah, I mean,
Americans are saying, have one.
I'm worried that if the
just to be clear, I love all people, including the Scots
I worry
and a
that
number
if
of
China
Californians.
tried to invade America, California would throw them a welcoming party.
Look, I feel like this is going off on a tangent, and having only been to California once, I'm in dangerous
Not well on the
territory.
Scots, Rad.
But and I love the Scots too, of course. But the reality is, these are Scottish nationalism is a luxury belief, and it got going at the end of the very brief end of history. It got big in the 1990s when we all felt comfortable enough to indulge these beliefs. And to Alan's point, there are people trying to promote this kind of the end of Britain in that case. And this, what I've said about Israel and what these other gentlemen have said, these are similar points. We need to get real. We have very well-armed adversaries who are trying to take apart our civilization. And it's, again, to return to the point about Russia, it is a development. These are variations on the theme of what the Kremlin perfected in the Cold War, which was to use educational institutions like teacher training to Marxify our society and pit different groups against each other.
And I asked the two British folks here, does the next election matter? And if it does, who will you vote for?
Well, of course it matters. This is the pivotal election. I know everyone says this is a pivotal election, but
No, this one really is.
But this one really is, because the whole future of the country rests on that next vote. Because you are either going to go into the morass of collectivization, ending in, high taxation, demographic disaster, migration run rampant, or you're going to take a stop to that. Now, to declare my political affiliation, I'm Reform's chief advisor on global affairs. Of course, Reform's the only party that's going to sort this out, because Britain needs a radical shift and transformation, no sort of subtle moves here. Only a 1979-style revolution is going to make a difference here and turn us back. But the good news is it can be done. Britain is an unusual country, because if you control a majority in the House of Commons, you can pretty much affect any revolution you want.
Radomir?
So, I think this is an important
You could
point.
just say, I agree.
Parliament is, well, but I'm only going to go so far. Parliament is sovereign. We need the right combination of people in Parliament and the right combination of parties. I'm not a member of any political party. Who knows who I will vote for? But what I will say is that the politics I believe in, I regard as straightforward common sense politics, that for the vast majority of this country's history would have been seen as very boring indeed. I would like borders that function. I would like an economy that isn't based on a vast and growing tax take, another plan by our incoming Prime Minister. Straightforward small c conservatism is what is going to save this country, and that includes in our geostrategic approach.
I agree. Thank you all,
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
and good luck with this election and saving your country.
Thanks so much.